Welcome to my video on the best Terastal for every normal type Pokemon. So in this video we're going to go through the pure normal type and all of the dual type combinations and assign them the best Terastal. Now I've given typically more than one Terastal for every Pokemon and I've explained why I've given those Terastals. What I would really appreciate if you could like, subscribe and comment in this video. It is just a big project that has taken a lot of time, and I really don't want to see this flop because of the sheer amount of time and effort that I have put into this. If you're looking for a specific dual typing, then you can go down to the description below, sorry not comments, description. If you go into the description and have a look at the timestamps, it will have it all assigned there. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Just some clarification about this video. First of all, this is not an exhaustive list of every single Terastal that would work well with that typing. It's just ones that, in my opinion, would work best for those specific typings. Also, this does not factor in abilities, so in the trailer we saw that Colossal turned to a water-type Terastal and had its steam engine activated. Now, in some cases there are going to be abilities that are going to allow for this to be able to take place effectively, and it's going to allow for abilities to be used with regards to the Terastal combination. And when I've talked about their typings here, I have not considered abilities. I will talk about that separately when I do the competitive guide videos in the future. Also, some Pokemon may be suitable to use specific Terastal based on powerful moves that they have. So for example, if a Pokemon has a ground type move such as Earthquake, which is more powerful than Tera Blast, then they could definitely turn to that Terastal to get that stab to be able to allow that to do more damage. So in some cases where Pokemon have got powerful moves or a wide move pool, they may be suitable to use more variety of Terastal, but again, I have not factored that in with this one, just on the specific typings as a generalization. When it comes to the pure normal type, the suggested Terastals that I have are Fairy or Flying or Psychic. Now, they are mostly to cover the fighting types, as normal type is only weak to fighting type Pokemon. I would say Fairy, Flying, Psychic because they are super effective against fighting types. They're the ones that are more likely to come in. You also have Poison and Ghost, which are resistant or immune to the fighting type as well, and I think that would be really good to have as an opportunity there. You could also have a Ghost type Pokemon come in on a normal type, because obviously normal type stab, Ghost types are immune to normal types, so turning into a Ghost type could definitely work there very well in your favour, but bear in mind that obviously they will be super effective against you as well. So I would say that's the weakest Terastal of the 5 that I've put there. Now, notable Pokemon, you have got things like Blissey and Chansey, which can work really well. Tauros has a really good move pool, really fast. Miltank, Ambipom, Regigigas, Porygon 2, Kangaskhan. There are tons of pure normal types, so there are going to be plenty more there, but they're just a few Pokemon that I have found that I personally really like to use in competitive, and they have a relatively wide move pool. And the reason I'm going to mention this in this one is because with normal types, you have a wide amount of different type moves. Now, Tera Blast is looking to be potentially about base 80. I think I've heard that on the grapevine somewhere. But it's not going to be as powerful as some other attacks. So quite a few Pokemon will get access to things like Earthquake. So if you wanted to go for the ground Terastal to get the stab boost for the Earthquake, then that would definitely be doable. So any move that the normal type Pokemon has that would be outside of the normal range of Tera Blast and increasing in power, then obviously you can go for that Terastal as well. But as I said, this isn't an exhaustive list, this is just recommendations on the general typings based on the original type. Coming into a typing that we don't have any Pokemon currently, but it could definitely come out at some point in this generation, we have the normal bug typing. Now, the 3 Terastals I'd recommend here is Electric. With normal bug, you're likely to have a flying type come in, and Electric obviously will be super effective against that flying type. Also, ground type as well. You can see a fire type come in against this most definitely, and rock type as well to cover both the flying and the fire aspects there as well. Now, obviously you can use other Terastals, but I think that these 3 are the top 3 ranking. Rock, I would say, is definitely the best one there because it covers 2 of your main weaknesses that probably would come in. But ground and electric are also usable. It just depends on what team that you have built. Now, normal dark Pokemon, we have the flying type being the most usable here, along with the fairy and the psychic type. The big typing you're expecting to come in against these is the fighting type. So fighting type Pokemon are going to be a massive problem for this. If you can turn to a flying fairy or psychic, you have the super effective aspect when it comes to Tera Blast or any other attack that you might have that might be able to be boosted. You've also got the Ghost type as well. Obviously that's immune to the fighting type, so that gives you the defensive aspect. You could potentially even go for a poison type here that resists the fighting type and also would be super effective against fairy types that might come in, but I definitely focus more on the fighting type aspect here because fighting type very common moves and could definitely be problematic for you. The notable Pokemon, you've got Obstagoon and you've also got Alolan Raticate. Those are the only two dark normal Pokemon that currently exist as a final evolution line, but definitely they could take advantage of any of those Terastals. But as I said, this isn't an exhaustive list. Next up, we have the normal and dragon type Pokemon. So the only Pokemon we have at the minute is Drampa, but we could definitely see one in the future. We have got 3 suggested Terastal. Now, I've put Steel here. You do need to be quite careful with Steel. You need to make some predictions on what the opponent's going to bring in terms of going for a Steel one, because you are currently weak to fighting, and if a fighting type Pokemon does come in, then obviously that is going to cause problems for you with regards to being a Steel type, because that's super effective still. But in terms of a Dragon or a Fairy type, you would then be in benefit because they wouldn't be super effective against you. You also have Ghost typing again, covering for those fighting types, which obviously are a massive problem for you, and it will also cover any other aspects that you might want a Ghost type to come in. You can then hit them with a Ghost type move. And then you've got Fairy typing here as well, which will cover the Dragon aspect, because dragons often do come in on dragons, and that would probably be the best of the 3, I would say. I think Fairy works very well here. That would cover any fighting types that come in also, which could be really beneficial to you. Next up, we have the normal and electric typing. So the only Pokemon we've got here is Heliolisk. The typings that I would suggest for Terastal would be the flying type. That would cover any fighting type weakness. Obviously, you're going to have fighting types come in because of the normal aspect. And flying, you could also use Psychic or Fairy here as well. Any of them would work, but I've just decided to put flying. Water, because you are likely to have a ground type Pokemon come in, and the Water Terastal would mean that you are able to get rid of that ground type Pokemon a lot easier. We'd have that super effective typing. And then also Bug to resist any of the ground type attacks that are going to hit you, and also Bug can be used on a couple of other different Pokemon, such as things like Psychic and also Dark type Pokemon, which might come in. Obviously not looking for the super effective aspect, but looking more of a defensive aspect of what Pokemon might come in. Next up, we have got the normal Fairy typing. So this one kind of throws out your fighting type weakness. The only Pokemon we have here is Wigglytuff currently, but there are 3 Terastals that I would definitely recommend. You have got the Steel type. Now, you are likely to have a Pokemon come in that is Poison type. Steel type is going to be completely immune to any Poison type attacks, so that could be very helpful in a defensive form. You've got Fighting type in case the Steel type comes in. You've then got a super effective attack alongside them, and I believe that Fighting resists Steel, but don't hold me to that one because that's one I'm not 100% sure on. And also Ground type to hit both the Steel and the Poison type, which are likely to come in due to your Fairy weaknesses. Now obviously, in terms of your normal type, you've got no weaknesses, so the only weaknesses here would be your Poison, Steel, which the ground covers fantastically. I would say ground probably is the best Terastal in this case. Next up, we have the normal fighting type Pokemon, which is Beware. Currently, that is the only one that applies to this typing, but I have got 4 suggested Terastal for this one. You have got the side where it comes to the fighting, so you can see a flying type come in, so you go for the electric type move, because obviously that would be super effective. You could also see a psychic type come in, and then have the dark Terastal. You could replace that with Ghost if you wanted to, but I thought Dark works quite nicely here. You do have the flying Terastal as well, in case you're coming in with a fighting type Pokemon. That flying Terastal would obviously be able to take away your weakness to the fighting type, resist the fighting type, and also be super effective against the fighting type. And the same reasoning for the Fairy type being in there as well, purely for the fighting type that is likely to come in. Now, you could also run things like Poison and Steel on this one if you wanted to, obviously with a Fairy type move, Fairy type potentially coming in. But obviously, as I said, this isn't an exhaustive list, but sometimes there are very situational cases where you could have a lot of different Terastals that would work. Now we have normal and fire type. The only normal fire type we have currently is Pyroar, and what we have here is the grass type as our first Terastal. Now, realistically, in a normal fire type Pokemon, water types and ground types are probably going to come in, even rock types, and grass is super effective against all 3 of those. So grass is a fantastic Terastal for any of those weaknesses involved with fire. I've also suggested Dragon here because a lot of the Pokemon that would come in, so for example the water types, it is a resistance. So you have got the Dragon being able to resist different aspects here. Now obviously super effective, it wouldn't work necessarily as well, but I thought Dragon type could work quite nicely as a Terastal here, and then also flying to again cover your fighting type weakness because obviously you've got a huge normal type on your back, which means fighting types can hit you super effectively as well. So going for the flying type means that you can then be super effective against those fighting types that could possibly come in. So I'd say grass or flying type. Flying type also will be immune to the ground aspect with the Pokemon, so that could definitely work there as well. But grass or flying I think will be your best Terastal in this. Next up we have one of the most common typings in the game of the normal flying type Pokemon. So here we have 3 suggested different Terastal. You've got the fire type Terastal. Now realistically you could have an ice type Pokemon come in against normal flying type, that would be super effective. Obviously the fire type Terastal would get rid of the ice type. I also thought grass could work quite effectively because you could possibly have your rock type come in, then obviously it's super effective against your rock type, and it also resists the electric typing as well, but the ice typing is also super effective against grass type, so that doesn't necessarily work amazingly. And then you have the ground type, which again doesn't resist the ice type, but it does hit both the rock and the electric type for super effective damage. So there are 3 different options there that I think work best. Now you do have to be very careful when it comes to the ice typing if you go for the grass or the ground, or in terms of the rock typing when it comes to the fire type Pokemon. So it depends on how you personally want to run it and what your situation is with your team in this case. Notable Pokemon that I've put here, you've got Staraptor, Braviary, Toucanon and Swellow, but there are many more normal flying type Pokemon that do fit in well into this category of being notable Pokemon, but I just thought 4 because that was really what I could fit inside of the box. Next up we have the normal ghost Pokemon. Now the only Pokemon that we have is a Hisuian Zoroark, and essentially this thing only has 1 weakness. This is only weak to dark type Pokemon. Now, because of the dark type weakness, you have got 2 types here. You could also run the bug type Terastal, but typically bug type is deemed as quite weak because it does have quite a few weaknesses. But I would suggest the fighting type or the fairy type. They are both super effective against dark type Pokemon. Fighting types also will hit things like normal types as well. Now, you wouldn't bother with the ghost type here because realistically, you wouldn't bother with anything weakening to ghost because the ghost types are going to not come in because it's a normal type. So yeah, I'd recommend fighting or fairy in this. Next up we have the normal grass type, and at current time of recording we only have Swordsbuck that fits into this category. But the Terastals that I would recommend for you in this case, you have got the water type and the ground type. Now these cover the fire type weakness. Obviously if you have a fire type coming against you and you turn to a water type, that's super effective. Same with the ground typing being super effective as well. You obviously do have the aspect that you are normal type, so you will be hit by super effective fighting type attacks as well. So that's why I put the flying Terastal in, but you could also have the fairy or the psychic Terastal in replacement of that to be super effective against those fighting type Pokemon. But that was just down to personal preference why I put the flying type in there. So water, ground, flying, those are going to work fantastically for your normal grass type. Next up we have the normal ground type. Again, only 1 Pokemon representing this with Diggersby. And what we have got here is the grass type, dragon type and psychic type Terastal. Now the grass type covers the water type that would come in against the ground type to be super effective. Obviously that then is super effective and resists the water. Dragon resists both grass and water type, which would be super effective against your ground typing. And I thought the dragon would work really well in that respect. And then I've gone for the psychic in terms of your fighter type weakness, but you could also go for the flying. You could also go for the fairy as well. You could go for any of those ones. They would work well for this Terastal in more of a defensive sense. Here we have the normal and the ice type Pokemon. Now there are none currently in the Pokedex at time of recording this, but we have got 3 different Terastal. In fact, I would suggest 5 different Terastals here. You've got the psychic, you've got the fairy and the flying. Now psychic, fairy and flying, they all cover your fighting type weakness. Obviously you're 4 times weak to fighting, so having those would work very well there. You have the ground typing here as well. and that would allow you just to cover things like steel types, which would be super effective against you, and also rock types that would be super effective against you. And then fighting works in the exact same way, steel and rock types that are going to be super effective. And also fighting versus fighting is neutral, ground versus fighting is neutral as well, so that would allow for you to take far less damage, because that is obviously 4 times weak to the fighting type. So definitely Terastal would work fantastically with this Pokemon if this ever begins to exist. Next up we have the normal poison type, where there are no Pokemon currently at time of recording. We have got 4 different Terastals that I'd recommend for this one. You've got the grass and water in terms of what will come in against the poison type. You'll expect a ground type most likely to come in against the poison type, and the grass and the water are both super effective against that ground type that predictably would come in. You've then got dark type to cover the psychic type that could come in against the poison type, and obviously that would be super effective. You just need to be aware potentially someone could bring in a fighting type on a neutral aspect. Obviously you're not going to get that 2 times damage from the neutral aspect. And then you've got psychic here as well. Now psychic will resist the psychic type attacks that could potentially come in from the poison type, and they'll also hit the ground type for neutral damage as well. So psychic potentially could work alright here, but I would definitely say grass, water, dark would be your bigger ones in this aspect. Here we have the normal and psychic type Pokemon. There are 2 notable Pokemon in Oranguru and Indeedee that have this typing. Now, suggested Terastal, your big one probably is going to be the fighting type. The normal psychic type Pokemon, realistically, the main weakness that you are going to see is going to be with the dark type. So dark type moves are quite common, and dark type Pokemon will likely to come in. You could also see a bug type Pokemon come in, so you could definitely have a fire Terastal if you predict that, but psychic type is probably more likely to be than a bug type. And the fighting type, sorry, not psychic type, the dark type, and the fighting type would then be super effective against that dark type that comes in. I've then put dark in as it would resist the dark type Pokemon that comes in, and you potentially could use a dark type attack, because quite a few Pokemon do get access to quite powerful dark type attacks. And then you've got fairy type, again covering any dark type Pokemon that wants to come in, and it also resists the bug type, which could come in as well. So I would say in this case fairy probably is going to be your best, followed by fighting, followed by dark, but you could run something like flying or fire if you wanted to get rid of the bug weakness. Next up we have the normal and rock type, which at the time of recording there are no Pokemon listed as normal rock type. The suggested Terastal I have for these ones are electric. Now, realistically, you're going to have water types come in against this, so electric could definitely work in terms of getting rid of the water type that would come in. You've got the flying type to cover both the grass type Pokemon that could come in against the rock type, and also the aspect of the fighting type Pokemon that would come in. So flying does cover 2 of your big weaknesses here, and then you've also got psychic, which again covers the fighting types coming in as well. You could put fairy in here as well if you wanted to, but that is entirely up to you. You have got the opportunity of there being things like ground types coming in, so you could have water or grass could potentially come in as well, but I would limit it down to be these 3. I think flying would probably be the best Terastal for a normal rock type Pokemon. Here we have the normal and steel type Pokemon, which there are none currently representative in the Pokedex, and the main weakness that you would have here is going to be your fighting type. There is going to be a secondary weakness in ground type Pokemon, but you've got 4 times effective on your fighter type, and they are very common. So psychic, flying and fairy, they cover the weakness of the fighter type on all 3 of them. Flying also covers your weakness in terms of the ground type as well, because it will be immune to it. So those are the 3 different types that I would definitely recommend for your steel Terastal, mostly in terms of fighting, but also flying in terms of the ground aspect as well. So I think flying in this case would be the best Terastal type. Next up we have normal water type Pokemon, and we have one of the gods itself, Bibarel, or Bibarel, however you pronounce it, representing this typing, and we have got 3 different Terastal types that I would recommend. Now, in this case, you are likely to potentially see a fighting type, a grass type, or a electric type. So fire would cover any of the grass types that would come in. In case of a electric type coming in, you would have the ground type Terastal coming in, and then flying would also cover the fighting aspect as well as covering the grass aspect. So I think flying would definitely be one of the better opportunities to use here. Obviously it wouldn't cover the electric type, and you would still be weak to the electric type, so flying or ground depending on how your team is already set is what I would recommend with terms 2. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single view that any of these videos get, and you know I put so much time into this that if you made it this way, then all I can do is thank you with my heart, because you know you're what helps the channel. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. As I said, if you could interact, I'd really appreciate it. Comment down below if there are any ones that you disagree with, or any ones that you would add a different Terastal typing to, and give your reasoning for it as well. And I'd really love to see that. I think that would be a really cool way to interact with me, and I will definitely take a look at them, and I'll try and reply as much as I can. But yeah, thank you so much for watching.